Sarah Mitchell sat by Cedar Creek with tears streaming down her face, her designer heels sinking into the muddy bank. The expensive suit she wore was completely out of place in this rural Montana landscape. She had driven for hours after receiving the devastating news that her startup company had gone bankrupt, taking with it every penny she had invested and leaving her drowning in debt. The weight of failure pressed down on her chest as she watched the water flow past, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. She didn't hear the footsteps approaching until a weathered cowboy boot appeared in her peripheral vision. Jack Morrison, owner of the Broken Arrow Ranch, had been riding his horse along the creek when he spotted the crying woman. Without saying a word, he dismounted and sat down beside her on the grassy bank, leaving a respectful distance between them. He removed his worn Stetson and set it on his knee, his sun-bronzed face showing concern but not prying curiosity. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Jack simply sat there, occasionally picking up small pebbles and tossing them into the creek. His presence was oddly comforting, not demanding explanations or offering empty platitudes. Sarah found herself stealing glances at this stranger who seemed perfectly content to sit in silence with a weeping woman he had never met before. Finally, Sarah's tears began to slow. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, feeling embarrassed about her expensive mascara, probably running down her cheeks. Jack pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and offered it to her without looking directly at her, giving her privacy in her vulnerable moment. She took it gratefully, dabbing at her eyes and trying to compose herself. "I don't usually fall apart like this," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from crying. "I'm sorry you had to witness that." Jack turned to look at her then, his blue eyes kind and understanding. "No need to apologize for tears," he said in a low, gentle voice. "Sometimes life knocks us flat, and crying is just proof we're still human enough to feel it." Sarah let out a shaky laugh despite herself. There was something about this rancher's straightforward wisdom that cut through all the corporate speak and social media pretenses she had lived with for so long. She found herself wanting to explain, to unload the burden she had been carrying alone for weeks. "I lost everything," she said simply. "My business, my savings, my apartment. Everything I worked for just disappeared." Jack nodded slowly, understanding crossing his face. He had seen that look before in people who had lost their family farms or watched their cattle die in harsh winters. "That's a heavy load to carry," he acknowledged. He didn't try to minimize her pain or tell her it would all work out. He simply recognized it for what it was. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Sarah realized she had been sitting there for over an hour, and this stranger had stayed with her the entire time. "I should let you get back to your ranch," she said, starting to stand. But Jack remained seated, looking up at her with a gentle smile that transformed his rugged face. "I'll wait until your smile returns," he said firmly, patting the ground beside him. "Can't leave someone alone when they're hurting like this." "That wouldn't be right." Sarah felt fresh tears spring to her eyes, but these were different. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen and valued, not for what she could achieve or produce, but simply for being human. She sat back down, this time a little closer. They talked as the stars began to appear overhead. Jack told her about ranch life, about losing his parents' original homestead to a bank foreclosure when he was younger, about building the Broken Arrow from nothing. Sarah shared her story too, about the pressure to succeed, the investors who had pulled out, the employees she had to let go. As darkness settled around them, Jack's horse grazed nearby and Sarah realized something had shifted inside her. The crushing weight hadn't disappeared, but it felt somehow more bearable. This rancher, with his quiet strength and patient presence, had given her something she desperately needed, someone who would simply sit with her pain without trying to fix it or judge her for it. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly. "For staying." Jack stood up and offered her his hand, pulling her to her feet. "I meant what I said," he told her, his voice steady and sure. "I'll wait as long as it takes. Your smile's in there somewhere. Just needs time to find its way back to the surface." Sarah looked at this man who had shown her more kindness in a few hours than she had experienced in months of business dealings. She didn't know what would happen next or how she would rebuild her life, but somehow Jack's promise had planted a tiny seed of hope in her heart. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way forward after all. Jack offered to drive her to the nearest town where she had left her car at a diner. As they walked toward his truck, Sarah realized that this chance encounter by Cedar Creek might be the beginning of something she never expected. Not just recovery from her losses, but perhaps a completely different kind of life than the one she had been chasing. And for the first time in a long time, that possibility didn't terrify her. The next morning, Sarah woke up in a cheap motel room with sunlight streaming through thin curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back. She reached for her phone and saw several missed calls from creditors, but there was also a text from an unknown number. "There's always work at the ranch if you need it. No pressure, Jack." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. The idea was absurd. She was a tech entrepreneur with an MBA from Stanford, not a ranch hand. But then again, she was also unemployed, nearly homeless, and running out of options fast. Her expensive hotel in the city had been abandoned days ago when her credit cards maxed out. This roadside motel was all she could afford now. She drove back toward Cedar Creek, telling herself she just wanted to thank Jack properly for his kindness. But when she pulled up to the Broken Arrow Ranch and saw the sprawling property with its white fences and grazing horses, something stirred in her chest. Jack was standing near the barn, and when he saw her car, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Wasn't sure you'd come back," he said, walking over with that easy, confident stride. "But I'm glad you did." Sarah got out of the car, suddenly feeling foolish in her wrinkled business casual clothes. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, "and maybe ask about that work you mentioned. I don't know anything about ranching, but I'm a fast learner." Jack's smile widened. "Best kind of student is one who knows they don't know," he said. "Come on, I'll show you around." He introduced her to his ranch manager, Tom, a grizzled man in his 60s who looked skeptical but nodded politely. Then there was Maria, the cook who lived in a cottage on the property and ran the house with efficient warmth. The work was nothing like Sarah had ever experienced. Jack started her with simple tasks, feeding chickens and collecting eggs, mucking out stalls, and helping Maria in the garden. Every muscle in Sarah's body ached by the end of the first day, and she collapsed into the small guest room Jack had offered her above the barn. But despite the exhaustion, she slept better than she had in months. Days turned into weeks. Sarah learned to ride horses, mend fences, and even assist with treating minor injuries in the livestock. Jack was always patient, showing her how to do things rather than just telling her. He had a way of teaching that made her feel capable rather than stupid, even when she made mistakes. And slowly, very slowly, Sarah began to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. They fell into a comfortable routine. Morning started early with coffee on the porch while Jack outlined the day's work. They would work alongside each other, Jack often sharing stories about the land, his family history, or the animals. During lunch, Maria would serve hearty meals that Sarah had never tasted anything like. Food that seemed to nourish not just her body but her soul. Evenings were Sarah's favorite time. After dinner, she and Jack would often sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors. Sometimes they talked about everything and nothing. Other times they sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who truly understand each other. Jack never pushed her to talk about her past or her plans for the future. He simply existed in the present with her. One evening, about a month after Sarah had arrived, she caught herself laughing at one of Tom's terrible jokes. The sound surprised her so much that she stopped mid-laugh, her hand flying to her mouth. Jack looked over at her, his eyes crinkling at the corners with that gentle smile she had come to treasure. "There it is," he said softly. "I've been waiting for that." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "For what?" she asked, though she suspected she knew. "That smile of yours," Jack replied, setting down his coffee mug. "The real one. The one that reaches your eyes and makes your whole face light up. That's the one I've been waiting for." Sarah realized he was right. Somewhere between the early mornings and the honest work, between the simple meals and the quiet evenings, she had started to heal. The constant anxiety that had plagued her for months had eased. She still had debt and no clear career path, but those problems seemed less overwhelming now. She had found something more valuable than success. She had found herself again. Thank you, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion, for waiting, for giving me this space to figure things out. Jack reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. Nothing to thank me for, he said. You did the hard work. I just gave you a place to do it. That night, as Sarah lay in bed listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night, she realized something profound had shifted. She wasn't just healing from her business failure anymore. She was discovering a completely different version of herself, one who found joy in simple things, who valued genuine connection over professional success, who could sit in silence without needing to fill it with productivity. And at the center of this transformation was Jack Morrison, the rancher who had kept his promise. He had waited, with infinite patience and unwavering faith, for her smile to return. What Sarah didn't know yet was that in the process of healing, she had also begun to fall deeply in love with this quiet, steady man who had shown her what real strength looked like. The first frost of autumn arrived, coating the ranch in a delicate layer of white crystals that sparkled in the early morning sun. Sarah stood on the porch wrapped in one of Jack's old flannel jackets, breathing in the crisp air and marveling at how much her life had changed in just 3 months. The woman who had sobbed by Cedar Creek felt like a stranger now, someone from a different lifetime. Jack emerged from the barn, leading his favorite horse, Dakota, and waved her over. Got something special planned today, he called out. Sarah hurried down the steps, curiosity lighting up her face. These days, Jack's surprises ranged from teaching her to rope cattle to taking her to hidden meadows filled with wildflowers. Each one revealed another layer of this complex man who seemed so simple on the surface. They rode out together, Sarah now confident enough in the saddle to keep pace with Jack's easy gait. He led her up a winding trail she hadn't explored before, climbing higher into the foothills until they reached a plateau that overlooked the entire valley. The view was breathtaking. The Broken Arrow Ranch spread out below them like a patchwork quilt of fields and pastures, with a silver ribbon of Cedar Creek cutting through it all. This is where I come when I need to think, Jack said, dismounting and helping Sarah down. My grandfather brought me here when I was a boy. Told me that sometimes you need to get above your problems to see them clearly. They sat on a large flat rock, shoulders touching, sharing the silence and the view. Sarah had learned that Jack rarely spoke without purpose, so she waited, sensing he had brought her here for a reason. After a while, he cleared his throat, a gesture she recognized as him gathering courage. I need to tell you something, he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, and I need you to know it comes with no expectations, no pressure. Her heart began to race, but she kept her expression calm, encouraging him to continue. Jack turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense and sincere. These past months, having you here, watching you heal and grow, seeing you laugh again, it's been the best time of my life. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you, Sarah Mitchell. The words hung in the air between them, beautiful and terrifying. Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. She had suspected her own feelings, but hadn't dared to hope that Jack might feel the same way. I know you're still figuring out your life, Jack continued quickly. I know you might want to go back to the city, start another business, chase those dreams again. And if that's what you need, I'll understand. But I needed you to know how I feel. Sarah reached out and took his weathered hand in both of hers. Jack Morrison, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. I fell in love with you the day you sat down beside me by that creek. I just didn't know it yet. She saw relief and joy wash over his face, transforming it into something so beautiful it made her chest ache. He cupped her face gently with his free hand, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. So what do we do now? He asked softly. Sarah laughed, a sound of pure happiness that echoed across the valley. I have no idea, she admitted. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan, and somehow that feels perfect. Jack kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was nothing like the hurried, distracted kisses of her past relationships. This kiss felt like coming home, like finding the missing piece she hadn't known she was looking for. When they pulled apart, both were smiling, the kind of smiles that came from deep within. They stayed on the plateau for hours, talking about possibilities and dreams. Sarah admitted that she had been thinking about her career, but not in the way she had before. I don't want to go back to Silicon Valley, she confessed. But I do miss using my skills, solving problems, building something. I just want to do it differently this time, with meaning behind it. Jack listened intently as she shared a nascent idea that had been forming in her mind. She wanted to help other rural businesses and ranches develop better systems, use technology to make their operations more efficient and profitable. She could work remotely, consult, maybe even teach. It would combine her old skills with her new understanding of ranch life. You could base yourself right here, Jack said, his eyes lighting up. The guest room above the barn could be your office. We could build it out proper with everything you need. The way he said we made Sarah's heart soar. He wasn't just supporting her dream. He was already thinking of them as a team, a partnership. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, they rode back down to the ranch. But everything looked different now, infused with new meaning. This wasn't just Jack's ranch anymore. It was becoming their shared future. The Broken Arrow wasn't a refuge or a temporary healing place. It was home. That evening, Maria took one look at them walking in together, hands intertwined, faces glowing, and burst into delighted laughter. "About time," she said, pulling them both into a warm embrace. "I've been watching you two dance around each other for weeks. Tom owes me $20. Even gruff old Tom cracked a smile and offered his congratulations, shaking Jack's hand with genuine warmth. Later, sitting on the porch under a blanket of stars, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The bankruptcy that had seemed like the end of everything had actually been a beginning. Losing everything had given her the chance to find what truly mattered. The rancher who had promised to wait for her smile had given her so much more than that. He had given her a new life, a new purpose, and a love deeper than anything she had imagined possible. "What are you thinking about?" Jack asked, his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close against the cool night air. Sarah turned to him, her smile radiant in the moonlight. "I'm thinking about how sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you turns out to be the best thing. I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you found me crying by that creek." Jack kissed the top of her head, his voice warm with emotion. "I'm the one who should be grateful. You brought light back to this ranch, Sarah. You brought light back to my life." And sitting there in the peaceful darkness, surrounded by the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Winter arrived with a vengeance, blanketing the Broken Arrow Ranch in thick snow that transformed the landscape into a pristine white wonderland. Sarah discovered a new side of ranch life during these harsh months, one that required even more resilience and dedication. The early mornings were brutally cold, and keeping the animals fed and watered became a constant challenge. But through it all, Jack was there, teaching her, supporting her, loving her. Sarah had converted the space above the barn into a functional office, just as Jack had suggested. She had started small, offering consulting services to a few local ranches who were struggling with bookkeeping and inventory management. Word spread quickly in the tight-knit rural community, and soon she had more clients than she could handle. Her approach was different from her previous business, focused on sustainable growth and genuine relationships, rather than explosive scaling and investor returns. One particularly cold January morning, Sarah received an email that made her hands shake. Her former business partner, Marcus, had written to her. He had somehow tracked her down and wanted to meet, claimed he had a proposition that could clear her debts and get her back in the game. The email brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad, from her old life. She stared at the screen for a long time before Jack came up the stairs with 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, setting down the mugs and moving behind her to read over her shoulder. Sarah leaned back against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "It's from Marcus," she explained. "He wants to meet, says he can help me with my debt situation." She felt Jack tense slightly behind her, though his voice remained calm when he spoke. "What do you want to do?" he asked, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. It was so typical of Jack not to tell her what she should do, but to trust her to make her own decisions. Sarah closed the laptop and turned to face him. "I need to at least hear what he has to say," she said carefully. "Not because I want to go back to that life, but because I need closure. I need to face that part of my past head on." Jack nodded, understanding in his eyes, even though she could see the worry there too. "Then I'll come with you," he said firmly. "If you want me to, that is." Sarah felt a surge of love for this man who was willing to step into her old world, so foreign to his own, just to support her. I want you to, she said. I need you to. They drove to Denver the following week, Jack looking distinctly uncomfortable in dress slacks and a button-down shirt. Sarah couldn't help but smile at how he kept tugging at his collar like it was choking him. You look handsome, she assured him, straightening his collar at a stoplight. Just not very comfortable, he admitted with a rueful grin. Give me a flannel shirt and jeans any day. The restaurant where Marcus had suggested they meet was exactly the kind of place Sarah used to frequent. All sleek surfaces and minimalist decor, full of people in expensive suits talking loudly into their phones. Jack held her hand as they walked in, and Sarah felt the eyes of several diners on them. She knew they made an unusual pair, her in her simple but elegant dress, Jack with his rancher's tan and calloused hands, both of them carrying the fresh air of the mountains into this sterile urban space. Marcus was already seated, looking exactly as Sarah remembered, polished and confident in an expensive suit. But when he stood to greet them, she noticed the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his smile. Sarah, he said, moving in for a hug that she sidestepped, offering her hand instead. Marcus, this is Jack Morrison. Jack, Marcus Chen, my former business partner. The two men shook hands, and Sarah saw Marcus size Jack up, probably wondering what this rough-around-the-edges rancher was doing with his former partner. They sat down, and Marcus launched into his pitch without preamble. He had started a new company, already had significant funding, and wanted Sarah to join as chief technology officer. The salary he mentioned made her head spin, more than enough to clear all her debts within a year. I need someone I can trust, Marcus said, leaning forward intently. Someone brilliant who understands the vision. That's you, Sarah. It's always been you. Sarah listened politely as he outlined the opportunity, the equity stake, the potential for massive growth. It was everything she had once dreamed of, handed to her on a silver platter. And yet, as she listened, all she felt was a hollow emptiness. Jack sat quietly beside her throughout the pitch, his presence steady and reassuring. When Marcus finally finished and looked at her expectantly, Sarah took a deep breath. It's a generous offer, Marcus, she said carefully, but I'm going to have to decline. She saw shock flash across Marcus's face, followed quickly by disbelief. You can't be serious, Marcus said, glancing at Jack as if he might be the reason for her refusal. Sarah, this is your chance to get back everything you lost, to prove to everyone that you're still a player in this industry. Sarah shook her head, a calm certainty settling over her. I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore, she said. I've built a new life, one that makes me happy. The debt will get paid eventually, but not at the cost of my peace of mind. Marcus tried for another 20 minutes to change her mind, alternating between appeals to her ambition and thinly veiled warnings about throwing her career away. Through it all, Jack remained silent, though she felt his support radiating from him like warmth from a fire. Finally, she stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I appreciate you thinking of me, Marcus, she said, but my answer is no. I hope your venture succeeds, I really do, but it's going to have to succeed without me. As they walked out of the restaurant, Sarah felt lighter than she had in months, as if she had shed a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying. Jack opened the truck door for her, and once they were both inside, he turned to her with pride shining in his eyes. That took guts, he said simply. Walking away from that kind of money. Sarah reached over and took his hand. It wasn't hard, she admitted, because I knew exactly what I'd be giving up to get it, and no amount of money is worth losing what we have. Jack pulled her close, kissing her soundly right there in the parking lot, not caring who might see. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. The drive back to the ranch felt like a journey home in every sense of the word. Sarah watched the city fade behind them and the mountains grow larger ahead, and she knew she had made the right choice. Marcus's offer had been a test, one final temptation from her old life. And she had passed it, choosing love and authenticity over money and status. As they pulled up to the Broken Arrow Ranch, with its simple wooden buildings and wide open spaces, Sarah felt nothing but gratitude. This was where she belonged, beside this man who had waited for her smile and then given her every reason to keep smiling. The life she was building here, brick by brick, day by day, was worth more than any corporate success could ever be. Spring came to Montana with an explosion of color and life that took Sarah's breath away. After the long, harsh winter, the ranch transformed into a paradise of wildflowers, new calves, and endless blue skies. Sarah's consulting business had grown steadily, and she now had a small team of remote workers helping her serve ranches and farms across 3 states. The debt that had once seemed insurmountable was slowly but surely being paid down, but something else was growing alongside her business, something that both thrilled and terrified her. Sarah and Jack had grown closer than ever through the winter months, their love deepening into something solid and unshakable. They had fallen into a rhythm of life together that felt as natural as breathing, yet Sarah couldn't shake a nagging worry that had begun to keep her awake at night. She had been at the ranch for almost a year now, living in the room above the barn, sharing meals and evenings with Jack, but maintaining a certain distance that felt increasingly artificial. They hadn't talked about the future beyond vague plans and dreams. What did Jack really want? Did he see her as a permanent part of his life? Or was she still just a guest who had overstayed her welcome? The uncertainty gnawed at her. One evening in late April, Tom mentioned that he was planning to retire at the end of summer. "Getting too old for this work," he said gruffly over dinner, though his eyes were sad. "Time to let someone younger take over as ranch manager." Sarah saw Jack's face tighten with worry, and she understood why. Tom had been with the ranch since Jack's father's time. Replacing him wouldn't be easy. That night, Jack was unusually quiet, sitting on the porch long after Sarah had said goodnight. She tried to sleep but couldn't, feeling the distance between them like a physical thing. Finally, she got up and went back downstairs, finding Jack still sitting in the darkness, staring out at the moonlit fields. "Can't sleep either?" she asked softly, sitting beside him. Jack turned to her, and even in the dim light she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "About Tom leaving, about the ranch, about everything." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." Sarah's heart began to pound. "Of course," she said, reaching for his hand. Jack took a deep breath. "Do you see yourself still being here a year from now? 5 years from now? Because if you don't, I need to know. I need to start preparing myself for the day you leave." His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and Sarah felt her heart break at the pain in it. "Jack Morrison," she said firmly, turning to face him fully, "I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to leave." She saw hope flicker in his eyes, but also doubt. "I know I haven't said it enough, but this is my home now. You are my home. I don't want to be anywhere else or with anyone else." Jack cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently stroking her cheeks. "Then why are you still living above the barn?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Why are we still pretending that you're just a guest here when you're so much more than that? Sarah, I want you in my house, in my bed, in my life permanently. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night." Tears streamed down Sarah's face, but these were tears of joy. "I wanted that too," she whispered. "But I was afraid to assume, afraid to push for more than you were ready to give." Jack laughed, a sound of relief and happiness. "We're both fools then," he said, "dancing around what we both want because we're too scared to claim it." He stood up and pulled her to her feet. "Come with me," he said, leading her off the porch. Sarah followed, curious and excited as he walked her across the yard to the main house. He opened the door and led her inside, flipping on lights as they went. The house was cozy and masculine, with worn leather furniture and family photos on the walls. Jack led her upstairs to the master bedroom, a large space with windows overlooking the mountains. "This is where I want you," he said simply. "Not as a guest, not as someone who's just passing through, but as my partner in every sense of the word." He turned to her, his expression serious. "Sarah Mitchell, will you move in with me? Will you share this life with me officially and completely?" "Yes," Sarah said without hesitation, launching herself into his arms. "Yes, yes, yes!" Jack caught her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that left them both breathless. It was a kiss that spoke of commitment and forever, of two people who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go. They spent the rest of the night talking about the future, making plans that felt real and solid, now that they had finally been honest about what they wanted. Jack asked Sarah to become the ranch's business manager, combining her skills with Tom's knowledge to take over when he retired. She would run the business side while Jack handled the day-to-day operations. It was a perfect partnership, utilizing both their strengths. Over the next few weeks, Sarah moved her belongings from the barn to the main house. Maria was delighted, immediately declaring that the house needed a woman's touch and offering to help with any decorating Sarah wanted to do. Tom, in his gruff way, expressed his approval by teaching Sarah everything he knew about ranch management. Clearly pleased that the broken arrow would be in good hands, Sarah transformed the house subtly, adding warmth and personality without erasing Jack's family history. She hung her grandmother's quilt alongside Jack's mother's paintings, placed her books beside his on the shelves, and planted flowers in the garden that complemented the ones already there. It was a blending of two lives, two histories, into something new and beautiful. One evening, as they sat together on their porch, now truly theirs, Sarah looked out over the ranch and marveled at how far she had come. The woman who had sat weeping by Cedar Creek would barely recognize her life now. She had found not just recovery from her losses, but a complete transformation. She had discovered strength she never knew she possessed, peace she never knew existed, and love that exceeded her wildest dreams. Jack pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy?" he asked, though the smile in his voice said he already knew the answer. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Sarah replied truthfully. She thought back to that first day when Jack had promised to wait until her smile returned. He had done so much more than that. He had helped her discover what true happiness looked like, had shown her that success wasn't measured in dollars and accolades but in meaningful work, genuine relationships, and love that grew deeper with each passing day. As the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues, Sarah knew that this was just the beginning of their story together. There would be challenges ahead, hard work and difficult days, but they would face them together. And that made all the difference in the world. The morning of Tom's retirement party arrived with perfect weather, as if even nature wanted to celebrate the occasion. Sarah woke up in Jack's arms, as she had every morning for the past 6 months, and felt a surge of contentment so profound it almost hurt. She still marveled at how different her life was from the one she had left behind, how completely she had transformed from the broken woman by the creek. The party was set for the afternoon, but Sarah had a special mission that morning. She drove into town to pick up a package she had been expecting, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The small velvet box felt heavy in her pocket as she drove back to the ranch, rehearsing what she wanted to say. In all her careful planning and strategizing during her corporate days, she had never been as nervous about a presentation as she was about this moment. Jack was in the barn when she returned, working on some last-minute repairs before the guests arrived. Sarah watched him for a moment, admiring the way he moved with such confidence and purpose, the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders as he worked. He looked up and caught her staring, that slow smile spreading across his face that never failed to make her heart skip. "Come here often?" he teased, setting down his tools and wiping his hands on his jeans. Sarah walked over to him, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Jack, can we talk for a minute?" she asked, her voice betraying her nervousness. Concern immediately clouded his features. "Everything okay?" he asked, reaching for her hands. Sarah nodded, leading him to a hay bale where they could sit. She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. All her life she had followed traditional paths, met expectations, done what was expected of her. But this moment called for something different, something true to who she had become. "A year ago today," Sarah began, her voice steadier now, "I was sitting by Cedar Creek thinking my life was over. I had lost everything I thought mattered, everything I had worked so hard to build. And then you came along." She saw Jack's expression soften, his thumb rubbing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "You promised to wait until my smile returned," she continued, tears already forming in her eyes. "But you did so much more than that, Jack. You showed me what real strength looks like. You taught me that failure isn't the end. It's just a detour to something better. You loved me when I was broken and celebrated with me as I healed. You gave me a home, not just in this ranch, but in your heart." Jack opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah gently pressed her fingers to his lips. "Let me finish," she said with a watery smile. "I know this isn't how things are usually done. I know traditionally the man is supposed to ask, but nothing about us has been traditional, and I don't want to start now." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the velvet box, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant gold band. Jack's eyes widened in surprise and wonder. "Jack Morrison," Sarah said, her voice trembling with emotion, "you are the best man I have ever known. You're patient and kind, strong and gentle, wise and humble. You make me laugh, you make me think, and you make me want to be better every single day. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Jack just stared at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Then a laugh bubbled up from his chest, joyful and free. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, pulling her into his arms. "I have been carrying a ring around in my pocket for the past 2 months, trying to find the perfect moment to ask you the same question." He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a beautiful diamond ring with a design that incorporated a tiny horseshoe, a nod to their ranch life. Sarah gasped, then started laughing through her tears. "We really are perfect for each other," she said. "Even our proposals are synchronized. So is that a yes?" Jack asked, grinning widely. "Yes," Sarah said firmly. "Absolutely yes. On one condition." Jack raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" Sarah held up the ring she had bought for him. "You have to say yes, too." "That's the easiest question I've ever been asked," Jack said, taking the ring from her and sliding it onto his finger. It fit perfectly. Then he took the engagement ring and slipped it onto Sarah's finger, where it caught the light filtering through the barn windows. They sat there for a moment, just looking at each other, both wearing rings and smiles, both overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had just promised. The sound of cars pulling up outside reminded them that guests would be arriving soon for Tom's party. They stood up and Jack pulled Sarah close for a long, sweet kiss. "Should we tell everyone today?" he asked. Sarah considered for a moment, then shook her head. "Let's let Tom have his day," she said. "We can announce it tomorrow. Besides, I kind of like having this secret just between us for a little while." The party was a huge success. Neighbors from miles around came to celebrate Tom's 40 years of ranch work and wish him well in retirement. Maria outdid herself with the food, and stories were shared long into the evening. Tom gave a short, gruff speech thanking everyone, but his eyes were particularly warm when they landed on Sarah and Jack. "The ranch is in good hands," he said. "Better than I could have hoped for." As the sun began to set and the party wound down, Sarah found herself standing by Cedar Creek again, but this time Jack was beside her with his arm around her waist. They watched the water flow past, thinking about how much had changed since that first day when they met in this very spot. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked quietly. "Giving up your old life, staying here, choosing this path?" Sarah turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Not for a single second," she said with absolute certainty. "That old life was never really mine. I was playing a role, trying to be someone I thought I should be. This life here with you, this is real. This is me." She looked down at the ring on her finger, then at the matching one on Jack's hand. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You waited until my smile returned. But then you gave me so much more. You gave me reasons to keep smiling every single day for the rest of my life." Jack pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. "We saved each other," he said simply. "I was just existing before you came along, going through the motions. You brought joy back to this ranch, brought color back to my world. You made me remember what it feels like to really live." As twilight deepened and the first stars appeared overhead, they walked back to the house hand in hand, their future stretching out before them bright with promise. The woman who had once measured her worth in profit margins and investor presentations now measured it in sunrise walks with her horses, in meals shared around a family table, in the simple pleasure of working alongside the man she loved. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the heights of success to the depths of failure and finally to this place of true contentment. She had lost a business but found a calling. She had lost her savings but gained something priceless. She had lost her old identity but discovered her authentic self. And it had all started with a rancher who found her weeping by a creek, sat down beside her without judgment, and made a simple promise. He would wait until her smile returned. But Jack Morrison had done more than wait. He had created a space where healing was possible, where love could flourish, where two wounded souls could find each other and become whole. As they reached the porch of their home, Sarah turned back one last time to look at the ranch spread out in the gathering darkness. Lights twinkled from the barn and the workers' cottages. Horses moved peacefully in the pastures. The mountains stood eternal against the star-filled sky, and somewhere nearby, Cedar Creek continued its endless journey. The same water that had witnessed her tears now flowing past the home where she had found her happiness. Jack squeezed her hand, and she turned to see him smiling at her, that gentle, loving smile that still made her heart race. "Ready to go inside, future Mrs. Morrison?" he asked. Sarah smiled back, her joy radiating from every pore. "Ready, future Mr. Mitchell Morrison," she replied, making him laugh. They walked through the door together, stepping into their future, into a life built on love, trust, and the promise that they would face whatever came next side by side. Forever.